Part 1. Focus is not isolation. It's dominance without noise. It's ruling your mind before someone else does. Niccolò Machiavelli, the cold Florentine strategist, warned rulers that power begins not with armies or gold, but with the mind. Whoever controls focus controls the future. In the 16th century, that meant manipulating rumor, religion, and spectacle. In the 21st, it means manipulating algorithms, trends, and your own addiction to distraction. The battlefield has changed. Human nature has not. The silent weapon. They fear. They don't want you focused. They want you distracted. Scroll through your phone and you'll see it. The modern battlefield. Endless notifications, controversies, gossip, all designed to fragment your mind. Every time you react, you bleed energy. Every time you argue, you waste strength. Every time you chase approval, you surrender sovereignty. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The more you chase other people's thoughts, the more you become theirs. The more you anchor your focus inward, the more they become yours. Julius Caesar learned this lesson early. When rivals tried to provoke him with insults in the Roman Senate, he stayed silent. He refused to be baited, storing his energy until the day he crossed the Rubicon and seized Rome itself. He understood. Reacting is weakness. Focused silence is domination. Fast forward to the modern world. Look at Steve Jobs. He didn't waste time reacting to every critic. While competitors bragged about specs and features, Jobs disappeared into his reality distortion field, obsessively focusing on simplicity and design. When he returned, he unveiled products that changed entire industries. His silence was not absence, it was preparation. The lesson is clear. Focus is not philosophy. It is warfare, the enemy that smiles. The greatest enemy of power today doesn't come with a sword, it comes with a notification. Machiavelli wrote, "He who controls the people must control their minds first." In his time, it was sermons and gossip. Today, it is TikTok trends, outrage headlines, dopamine hits engineered by billion-dollar tech companies. Your destruction doesn't come by force. It comes disguised as entertainment. Napoleon Bonaparte saw this in his time. He famously said, "A soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of colored ribbon." He knew people could be distracted by meaningless rewards. Today, it's not ribbons, it's likes. And while you chase them, someone else is quietly sharpening the blade of strategy. Jeff Bezos once said, "If you're competitor-focused, you have to wait until there is a competitor doing something." Being customer-focused allows you to be more pioneering. Translation? Stop reacting. Start focusing. While rivals are busy copying and reacting, you're dictating the game. A distracted man never becomes dangerous. That's why the system keeps you distracted, because if you ever pulled your focus back, you'd terrify them. Isolation as refinement. They'll say you've changed, that you've gone cold, that you've become distant, but what they really mean is you've stopped being available to their chaos. Alexander the Great disappeared into silence before campaigns, obsessively studying maps while others feasted. His generals mocked his intensity until he returned to the battlefield with strategies no one anticipated. His solitude created fear because no one knew what he was plotting. In modern times, Elon Musk vanishes into weeks-long engineering sprints. While critics waste energy debating him online, he buries himself in factories, refining rockets or electric cars. Then he emerges, not with arguments, but with results that silence doubters. Strategic isolation is not retreat, it is regeneration. The world celebrates the man who is everywhere, but it fears the man who disappears, then returns 10 times sharper. So if you feel the urge to vanish, to stop explaining, to stop defending, to pull back into silence, honor it. Because in solitude, you are not avoiding people. You are avoiding noise, and when you resurface, you will not be the same. Write this below if you understand. My silence is sacred. The power of non-reaction. The one who reacts first loses. History proves it. During World War II, Winston Churchill understood the power of restraint. When German bombs rained on London, many demanded he retaliate immediately. Instead, he waited, calculating, choosing the moment that would yield maximum impact. His calm, unnerved enemies and inspired allies. Power does not shout. It watches. It waits. It calculates. Weak men, however, react instantly. They flinch, argue, explain, defend, and in that instant, they become predictable. Predictability is death in power games. Machiavelli warned, the intelligence of a ruler can be judged by the men he has around him. Today, you judge a man's power by how unbothered he remains in chaos. Your silence becomes confusion. Your calm becomes a threat. When they cannot read you, they fear you. Look at Vladimir Putin. Love him or hate him, his power comes not from charisma, but from unreadability. He rarely raises his voice. He lets rivals wonder what he's planning. That uncertainty becomes leverage. The Machiavellian man wants the same, not to be understood, but to be unreadable. So next time someone tries to bait you, remember, I am not here to react. I am here to rule. The ruthless question. Who owns your focus right now? Is it you, or is it the algorithm, the critics, the endless noise? History shows us that every man who built an empire, whether Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Jobs unveiling the iPhone, or Napoleon crowning himself emperor, won first by mastering focus. Not by reacting, not by chasing, but by pulling back, calculating, and striking only when it mattered. This is not just survival. This is sovereignty. In the next section, we'll go deeper into how self-focus becomes leverage, the kind of leverage that makes you untouchable in business, politics, and relationships. But before we continue, answer this honestly. Do you think Machiavelli was right, or was he too ruthless? Leave your thoughts below. Part 2. Self-focus as the forge of leverage. In every room, there are two kinds of men. One who speaks to prove himself, and one who listens, silent, patient, collecting information. The loud man wins applause. The quiet man wins leverage. Machiavelli would have told you, power is not taken. It is built quietly until no one can stop it. Self-focus is how that leverage is forged. Look at Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor. In debates, he rarely shouted. He watched. He measured. He studied the weaknesses of his rivals. Then, when the time was right, he struck with a policy or alliance that left them stunned. Germany was unified not through noise, but through quiet leverage. The same principle applies today. Jeff Bezos was mocked for years while Amazon lost money. Competitors boasted about profits while he stayed silent, obsessing over infrastructure. Decades later, his leverage was so great that competitors couldn't fight him. They could only submit. Leverage is built in silence by men who focus on sharpening their weapons while others waste energy performing. Disappear to multiply your value. The world tells you to stay visible, but history rewards those who vanish, refine, and return transformed. Napoleon's return from exile on Elba is legendary. When he reappeared in France, his enemies expected him to crawl back in shame. Instead, his presence electrified soldiers and citizens. Why? Because his absence had made him rare. His return multiplied his value. In modern times, Elon Musk often disappears into weeks of obsessive work. When he resurfaces, it's with a rocket launch or a new innovation, results so massive they silence doubters. While critics burn time attacking him on Twitter, he multiplies his leverage in silence. When you are always visible, you become common. When you vanish and return with results, you become unforgettable. Write this in the comments if you understand. My absence is expensive. Killing the hunger for eyes. Most men don't chase power. They chase attention. And because they confuse the two, they remain powerless. Napoleon understood this well. At his coronation, instead of letting the Pope crown him, he seized the crown and placed it on his own head. He didn't need validation. He took sovereignty. Contrast this with modern culture, where men beg algorithms for likes, followers, validation. They're not building power, they're training themselves to obey. Mark Zuckerberg once said, "The biggest risk is not taking any risk." What he meant was, stop playing for applause. Build something undeniable, and the world will follow. But the masses don't build, they perform, they wait for eyes, and in doing so, they stay enslaved. Validation is not power. Validation is a leash. The trap of modern validation. Think about it. Algorithms reward you when you're tame, when you play their game. They starve you when you step outside the script. That's not affirmation. That's conditioning. Machiavelli would have seen it instantly. He wrote that rulers should never depend on the people's love. It's fragile, conditional, unreliable. Dependence on praise is weakness. Today, most men collapse with a single insult or inflate with a single compliment. Their moods swing with strangers' reactions. That's not freedom. That's programming. And what is programmed can always be broken. The Machiavellian man refuses this. He validates himself not with applause, but with execution. Not with noise, but with results. The cold path of self-validation. Charles de Gaulle, the French general and president, was despised by critics for his aloofness. He didn't care. He said, "The graveyards are full of indispensable men." Meaning, praise is worthless. What matters is results. Steve Jobs lived the same way. He rarely sought approval. He validated himself through the products he built, the execution of his vision. People mocked him. Investors doubted him. But when the iPhone dropped, the world had no choice but to kneel. This is the cold path. You do not announce. You do not beg. You do not perform. You execute. And execution validates you in ways applause never can. Write this below if you understand. I build in silence. I validate through results. The price of being misunderstood. There is always a cost. When you stop seeking attention, people will misjudge you. They will call you arrogant. They will call you cold. They will whisper that you've changed. Good. Talleyrand, the master diplomat of Napoleonic Europe, was once called a sphinx without a riddle because no one could understand him. He embraced the insult. His mystery became his greatest weapon. When they can't read you, they waste energy guessing. Modern leaders do the same. Elon Musk is called crazy. Jeff Bezos is called robotic. Mark Zuckerberg is called emotionless. They don't care. They understand. Misunderstanding is not a weakness. It is camouflage. Machiavelli himself said a ruler must learn not to be good, but to appear good when it suits him. Appearances are tools, not truths. And sometimes the most powerful appearance is silence. The leverage of absence. Consider Winston Churchill. After World War I, his career collapsed. He vanished into isolation for nearly a decade, writing books, painting, building discipline. Critics thought he was finished. Then came World War II. He returned sharper, harder, and became Britain's greatest wartime leader. His absence had been his refinement. Or look at Naval Ravikant, the modern philosopher-investor. He avoids the spotlight, rarely speaks, but when he does, people hang on every word. Why? Because his scarcity makes his voice valuable. That is leverage. That is what self-focus creates. The unreadable man. This is the goal, not to be loved, not to be seen, not to be constantly explained, but to become unreadable. When you no longer need validation, you break the leash. When you no longer perform, you stop being predictable. And when you stop being predictable, you become dangerous. The crowd wants relevance. You build refinement. The crowd wants attention. You build substance. The crowd begs for eyes. You make your absence costly. That's leverage. In this second part, we've shown why self-focus builds leverage and why you must kill the addiction to validation. In part 3, we'll sharpen this further. How discipline becomes a fortress and emotional detachment becomes the invisible blade no one sees coming. But before we continue, answer this. Do you still chase attention, or have you begun to make your absence expensive? Comment below. Part 3. Discipline, the fortress of kings. Weak men wait for motivation. Strong men build systems. Machiavelli would have said it plainly. Fortresses are useful or not, depending on whether the prince has in himself or in the people that which defends him. The first fortress is always the self. If you cannot govern your time, you cannot govern anything else. The Romans understood this. Their legions weren't the strongest because of numbers. They were the most disciplined army in history. Soldiers trained daily, building roads, constructing siege weapons, drilling relentlessly. Even off the battlefield, their routines forged order. That discipline became Rome's true fortress, more durable than walls. Prussia did the same centuries later. Frederick the Great turned his soldiers into machines through relentless drills. He once said, "A soldier must fear his officer more than the enemy." Harsh? Yes. But it created an army that could defeat larger forces with precision. Today, the principle hasn't changed. Elon Musk runs on strict, segmented time blocks, squeezing hours like a general planning campaigns. Kobe Bryant, the basketball legend, trained at 4 a.m. while rivals slept. Their discipline wasn't glamorous, it was ruthless, and it made them untouchable. Every controlled hour is a brick in your fortress. Every ritual you guard becomes a wall between you and mediocrity. Structure is freedom. Most people confuse freedom with indulgence, doing whatever they want whenever they feel like it. But indulgence is not freedom. It is chaos. True freedom is built on structure. Napoleon said, "Order marches with me." His armies moved with clockwork precision because he knew that unpredictability on the battlefield came not from chaos, but from the order that allowed him to surprise enemies at the right moment. Look at modern military special forces. Their training is monotonous, repetitive, brutal. Why? Because structure kills hesitation. When chaos comes, discipline executes automatically. That is why most men fail. They wait to feel ready. They confuse activity with progress. They hope discipline will appear when needed, but it never does. The free man is the one who has mastered his rituals. He wakes before his feelings can stop him. He trains his body before weakness infects it. He structures his day before the world can steal it. Write this below if you understand. I don't wait for motivation. I follow my code. Time as a weapon. Time is the currency no one gets back. Machiavelli said, "A prince who loses time loses power." Winston Churchill understood this better than most. During World War II, his days were segmented into reading, writing, and brief naps so he could work around the clock. His routine gave him clarity while the world burned. His discipline was his shield. Compare that to the average man today, scrolling for hours, bleeding time, mistaking movement for achievement. He is unarmed in the battlefield of hours. Jeff Bezos built Amazon on long-term focus. While competitors obsessed over quarterly profits, he looked decades ahead, using time as his weapon. That discipline, choosing long over short, is why Amazon dominates. Ask yourself, who owns your hours, you or the noise? Because the man who controls his time already controls the future. the blade of detachment. If discipline is the fortress, then emotional detachment is the hidden blade. The most dangerous man in any room is not the loudest. It's the one who feels nothing but sees everything. Machiavelli wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Why? Because love expects vulnerability. Fear respects boundaries, and boundaries are built through emotional control. Joseph Stalin, ruthless as he was, mastered this. He rarely showed emotion, even when furious. His coldness terrified allies and enemies alike, because unreadability is power. In modern business, Warren Buffett is known for emotional detachment. While markets panic, he stays calm, calculating, waiting. His fortune was built not on speed, but on refusing to flinch. The lesson is clear. Emotion may guide humanity, but reaction kills power. The average versus the elite. The average man is owned by emotion. He argues when insulted. He explains when misunderstood. He reacts when provoked. He wastes energy on proving himself. The elite man does none of this. He closes the door silently. He doesn't fight battles beneath his purpose. He doesn't need to win arguments. He lets results speak. During the Congress of Vienna, Talleyrand, the French diplomat, was mocked, underestimated, baited into reaction. He never flinched. His silence unnerved rivals. By the end, he had secured France's position at the table of victors without an army. That's what detachment does. It lets fools burn themselves out while you conserve strength. Write this below if you've started training your calm. Detachment is my power. Training the blade. Detachment is not theory. It is training. You must learn to sit in rage and not act. 2. Feel insult and stay silent. To endure abandonment without chasing. Every time you resist, your blade sharpens. Spartans trained boys to steal food, not because they needed thieves, but because they needed warriors who could endure hunger without panic. That's what detachment is. Enduring discomfort without collapse. In modern life, Naval Ravikant teaches the same. Don't react to markets. Don't react to criticism. Don't react to praise. Detachment makes you immune. When they can't predict you, they can't control you. When they can't provoke you, they fear you. Peace through power. Detachment doesn't mean numbness. It means clarity. You don't confuse noise for truth. You don't beg liars for honesty. You don't chase betrayers for closure. Machiavelli's rulers thrived, not because they were emotional, but because they were composed. When rivals screamed, they calculated. When enemies threatened, they stayed calm. The world doesn't reward emotional men. It rewards the composed. So when they say you've changed, when they say you've gone cold, let them. What they really mean is they can no longer play you. In this third part, we've built the fortress of discipline and revealed detachment as a blade sharper than steel. In part 4, we'll go deeper into solitude as purification and evolution as the final blow. How disappearing into silence turns you into something unrecognizable, feared, and sovereign. But before we continue, answer this. Are you still owned by reaction, or have you begun sharpening the blade of detachment? Part 4. Solitude, the crucible of power. Most men fear solitude. They call it loneliness. They panic when no one texts back, when silence fills the room, when no one validates them. But what they fear is not the absence of people. It is the confrontation with themselves. Machiavelli would have told you, retreat is not weakness. It is refinement. A prince who cannot step back cannot see the board clearly. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, ruled Rome during plagues and wars. Surrounded by chaos, he turned inward, writing meditations alone in his tent. He didn't need crowds. He needed clarity. His solitude created one of the most enduring works of philosophy ever written. Centuries later, Abraham Lincoln endured deep isolation during the American Civil War. His cabinet doubted him, his generals failed him, and the nation was tearing apart. In solitude, he wrote speeches and reflections that gave him the clarity to hold the Union together. Solitude doesn't break strong men. It reveals them. Why they fear your silence. Understand this. Your enemies want you available. They want you reactive. They want you dependent on noise. Because as long as you're constantly explaining yourself, defending yourself, reacting, you are predictable. Napoleon's rivals mocked him during his exile on Elba, thinking he had been neutralized. But exile was not defeat. It was incubation. In silence, he rebuilt his resolve. When he returned, he marched from the coast of France to Paris without firing a shot. Soldiers sent to arrest him instead joined him. His silence had transformed into awe. Steve Jobs lived the same pattern. Exiled from Apple, many thought he was finished. But during his years in the wilderness, he refined his vision. When he returned, he rebuilt Apple into the most valuable company on earth. His solitude became his weapon. That is why the world demonizes silence. They don't want you disappearing because they know you'll come back unrecognizable. Write this below if you understand. I disappear to evolve. I return unrecognizable. The blueprint. Written in isolation, solitude is not escape. It is a war room. Churchill, after World War I, was ridiculed and sidelined. For nearly a decade, he retreated to writing, painting, studying history. Critics called him finished. But when Hitler rose, Churchill re-emerged sharper, hardened, ready to lead Britain through its darkest hour. His solitude wasn't idleness. It was preparation. In modern times, Naval Ravikant rarely speaks. He avoids noise. But when he does, his words cut through like steel, because scarcity gives them weight. His silence multiplies his influence. When you vanish, you don't waste time sulking. You build, you train when no one sees. You study when no one cares. You sharpen in the dark. Then, when you return, no one recognizes you. The pain of evolution. Evolution always feels like death before it feels like power. The old version of you must die. Your addictions, your weaknesses, your craving for applause, all must rot in silence. That death feels lonely. It feels cold. It feels like abandonment, but it is transformation. Think of the caterpillar dissolving into chaos before becoming a butterfly, or the blacksmith plunging raw iron into fire before forging steel. Solitude is your furnace. Evolution is the fire. Machiavelli said a ruler must be willing to change with the winds of fortune. But true change requires solitude. You cannot evolve in noise. Noise keeps you chained to old habits. Silence burns them away. The final blow, return unreadable. When you evolve in silence, your return is the final blow. Napoleon shocked Europe by returning from exile. Jobs stunned the tech world by rebuilding Apple. Even Nelson Mandela, after decades in prison, returned not bitter, not broken, but calm, strategic, and unshakable, transforming from prisoner to president. That is the power of evolution in solitude. You don't return louder, you don't return angrier, you return colder, sharper, unreadable, and that terrifies them because they can no longer predict you, no longer provoke you, no longer control you. Machiavelli wrote, "Men must either be caressed or annihilated." Evolution annihilates your old self. And when you come back, you're no longer someone they can manipulate. You are the storm they never saw coming. The silent revenge is tempting. But Machiavelli knew it often backfires, consuming rulers in cycles of blood and chaos. The smarter path is to rise so far above your enemies that they can no longer touch you. Stalin's rivals mocked him as a gray blur, thinking him weak. In silence, he built networks, studied opponents, and consolidated power. When he struck, it was final. His revenge wasn't an outburst, it was survival through unreadability. Your evolution works the same way. You don't need to explain. You don't need to retaliate. Your success is punishment enough. Their regret is seeing what you've become. The fear they cannot escape here is the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder the world feels you. Lincoln's silence at critical moments drove rivals mad. Jobs' secrecy around products built cult-like anticipation. Putin's unreadable pauses unsettle even seasoned diplomats. The less you show, the more they imagine. The less you reveal, the more they fear. Silence destabilizes. Solitude terrifies. Evolution breaks them. Crossing the line into sovereignty. When you return from solitude evolved, you do not return to old weakness. You don't chase validation. You don't waste energy on noise. You don't perform for applause. That man is gone, buried beneath every hard choice, every cold morning, every hour of ruthless solitude. You are sovereign now, and sovereignty is not given. It is taken, forged in silence, sharpened in solitude, revealed only when you choose to return. In this fourth part, we've seen solitude as the crucible and evolution as the final blow, the silent transformation that makes you untouchable. In part 5, we will conclude with the state of sovereignty. How to live as a Machiavellian strategist every day, ruling your mind like an empire, unreadable and unstoppable. But before we continue, ask yourself, if you vanished for 90 days, would anyone control you, or would they fear the man who returns? Comment below. Part 5. Sovereignty. The final stage. If you followed this path, killing distraction, guarding focus, mastering discipline, vanishing into solitude, then you've reached the threshold of something rare. Sovereignty. Machiavelli would call it the highest state of rule. Not ruling others first, but ruling yourself. Because only the man who rules himself can dictate terms to the world. Julius Caesar didn't simply conquer Rome with legions, he conquered himself first, refusing to react to petty insults, refusing to flinch when senators doubted him, focusing only on the endgame, absolute power. His self-mastery made his empire possible. Sovereignty means no one owns your focus. No one dictates your emotions. No one defines your worth. You are no longer a servant to chaos. You are the architect of order. Your mind as an empire. Imagine your mind as a city. Most men leave the gates wide open. Any fool can enter. Social media storms through the gates. Strangers' opinions plunder the marketplace. Distractions loot the treasury of time. Soon, nothing is left. But the sovereign closes the gates, builds walls, stations guards. Within, the city thrives. Disciplined, ordered, focused. Outsiders can knock, they can shout, but they cannot enter unless permitted. This is the fortress Machiavelli would demand you build, not of stone, but of self-command. When others waste energy explaining themselves, you conserve. When others shout, you wait. When others panic, you calculate. Your empire is not built by reaction. It is built by control, living as a strategist. This is where Machiavellian psychology separates from ordinary self-help. This is not about being positive. It is about being strategic. Every move must be intentional. Every word measured, every hour accounted for. Talleyrand, the French diplomat, mastered this art. In negotiations, he often said nothing, sometimes for hours. Rivals grew nervous, filling the silence with mistakes. His restraint shifted power. His unreadability gave him leverage. Modern leaders mirror this. Jeff Bezos once said, "We are stubborn on vision, but flexible on details." That's strategy. Stubborn on the long game, unemotional about the short term. Ask yourself, are you still reacting like a pawn, or are you moving like a strategist, planning 3 moves ahead? Silence as leverage. The less you reveal, the more they imagine. The less you react, the more they fear. Machiavelli himself used silence masterfully. In Florence, when accused of conspiracies, he rarely defended himself directly. He observed, calculated, waited. His enemies feared what they could not read. Warren Buffett embodies this principle today. While markets crash, investors scream, and commentators panic, he sits quietly, watching. Then, when the storm clears, he makes a single decisive move that redefines the game. His silence builds empires. Silence is not absence. It is presence sharpened into mystery. The ghost in their system. This is who you become, the ghost in their system. Not always visible, but always felt. Not loud, but always looming. Vladimir Putin uses this tactic ruthlessly. His pauses in interviews are longer than most men can endure. His unpredictability makes rivals second-guess every move. You may hate him, but you cannot deny the Machiavellian efficiency of unreadability. Your life must mirror this. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You let others project, guess, burn energy trying to decode you while you conserve strength. Predictable men are controlled. Unreadable men must be respected. Power in modern life. How does sovereignty look today? It looks like, in business, building something competitors can't anticipate. In politics, waiting until the right moment to strike when rivals exhaust themselves. In relationships, holding boundaries so firm that no manipulation can penetrate. In social life, refusing to trade self-worth for applause. Machiavelli's lessons are timeless because human nature never changes. Only the weapons change. Yesterday, it was chains. Today, it is algorithms. Tomorrow, it will be something else. But the principle endures. He who controls his mind controls the game. The shift they fear. Here's what terrifies them. When you no longer need anything from the world begins to need everything from you. When you don't chase approval, people chase your presence. When you don't explain, they speculate endlessly. When you don't react, they crumble under the weight of their own noise. That's why sovereign men are rare. They cannot be baited. They cannot be manipulated. They cannot be owned. Caesar crowned himself. Napoleon crowned himself. Jobs rebuilt his empire in exile. Mandela emerged from prison not broken, but sovereign. These men didn't wait for the world to validate them. They validated themselves, and the world followed. Your next move. So what now? You keep building, quietly, coldly, intentionally. You guard your focus like treasure. You disappear when needed. You return with results. You speak less. You calculate more. Every day you reinforce your fortress. Every day you sharpen the blade of detachment. Every day you move closer to complete sovereignty. And as you do, the distance between you and the average grows. You stop competing. You exist above. The ultimate power. Never forget. The ultimate power is not loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't explain. It doesn't chase. The ultimate power is sovereign, silent, cold, strategic. Machiavelli's coldest rule for mental power is this. Self-focus is not optional. It is the weapon that makes you untouchable. Use it, wield it, live it. Final engagement. If you've walked this entire journey, from distraction to discipline, from chaos to cold clarity, from weakness to sovereignty, write this below. I am the silence they cannot decode. And remember, this channel is for those who dare to see the world as it truly is, not as we wish it to be. So subscribe to Ruthless Psychology and join the community that uncovers the hidden rules of power, control, and influence, because out there the game is always on, and now you have the weapon.